Okay, welcome back everyone. In the previous episode, we got the outside of the hull glassed and then touched up with a thick epoxy fill coat. With the outside of the hull done for now, it's time to get to work on the inside. First up is loosening the forms so we can flip the hull. Prior to flipping the hull and off camera, I marked where all the forms were with some tape, so once the inside of the hull is done, I can hot glue the forms back in place to build the deck. Some of the forms yeeted themselves right on out of the hull during flipping. But that's fine, everything's marked, remember? While cutting out the forms way back in episode 1, I also made some cradles to hold the hull. With these attached to the workbench, I put the hull in place. This thing is only about 4 kilograms, or less than 10 pounds at the moment. Nice. So right now the shear line is pretty rough, with some overhanging glass and excess material on the bow. Before starting on the interior, I decided to trim the glass and cut the bow shear line to shape. This will be easier now with only one layer of exterior fabric on the hull. This involves scribing the shear line on the epoxy with a knife, cutting it a little proud with a saw, and then filing and planing the shears smooth. Next up is scraping clean and sanding smooth the interior. To be honest, this is my least favorite part of the whole build process. Plus it's a pain in the ass. And we've already seen some sanding, so we'll just do a quick montage and get to the fun parts. Now that the sanding is complete, it's time to reinforce the bow, stern, and some of the sharper edges in the hull. This is done using a fillet of thickened epoxy. And since I like clean fillets, I taped off the parts of the hull before mixing up and spreading the thickened epoxy. Even though these fillets will get covered up with fabric later, be hidden in the kayak's interior, and no one will ever see them, at least I'll know they look really good. After a quick sanding of the cured fillets, it's now time to laminate the hull's interior. For stiffness and aesthetics, I decided to laminate the hull with 5-ounce carbon fabric on the interior. I'm not sure if I would say that a carbon over wood lamination is more difficult to work than fiberglass, but it does take some extra attention to make sure the fabric gets fully wet out. Unlike fiberglass, the carbon doesn't go clear, obviously, so it's more time and attention intensive to make sure that all areas of the hull are getting enough epoxy. It helps that the luster of the carbon surface does change when it's fully wet out, so good lighting during this phase is a must. Laminating the hull's interior went pretty smoothly until the last couple of feet of the bow, where the kayak is just too narrow to work efficiently without some high-tech tools. Using my patented brush on a stick, I first painted on an epoxy coat on the bare wood. This should give me enough epoxy to saturate the wood and allow the fabric to stick. I folded a piece of fabric in half and using another high-tech tape on a stick device, worked the carbon into place. Then back to using the brush on a stick, I finished up saturating the carbon. For the very front, I saturated a small piece of carbon on the workbench, then worked it into place with the tape on a stick device, making sure to fully adhere the fabric to the hull. After cleaning up any excess epoxy and letting the saturation coat cure for a couple hours, I came back and filled the weave with a second coat of epoxy thickened with colloidal silica. I let the epoxy cure for a day or two and then came back to trim off the excess fabric and clean up the shear line. With the shear sanded smooth and the inside all cleaned up, I officially have half of a boat. But I'm nowhere near halfway done. In the next episode, we'll get back to the wood strips and start building the deck of the kayak. Until then, thanks for watching.